You know, it's been said that if you eat locally grown food and you wear locally produced clothing, you're part of New Mexico's agricultural history. And tonight we explore that history from its humble beginnings to becoming a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Welcome to Legendary New Mexico.
Legendary New Mexico, in partnership with TLC Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling.
The high deserts of New Mexico have grown millions of crops for hundreds of years. The Mogollon and basket makers are considered two of the earliest cultures in the state, beginning farming practices dating back between year 1 and 1300 AD. In 1540, Spanish conquistador Francisco Vázquez de Coronado introduced livestock to the state, followed in 1598 by Juan de Oñate, who brought with him hundreds of cattle, hogs, horses, steers, and bulls. Over the following centuries, New Mexico would grow from a primitive landscape of ranches and farms to an industrialized entity that blossomed with the United States annexation of the territory in 1848. And today, agriculture is a multi-billion-dollar industry for New Mexico, with more than 24,000 ranches within our borders providing product for both national and international clientele. With its sprawling rangelands and hundreds of cattle ranches, there are almost as many cattle as people here. 2 million people and 1.4 million cattle. As Bob Martin now reports, the beef ranching industry is both a cornerstone of the economy and full of Western tradition.
On the Boone Ranch in eastern New Mexico, cattle see the feed truck coming a mile away. The slow-motion stampede begins. Dry winter grass alone cannot sustain them, so rancher Pat Boone must drop feed pellets to supplement their diet. The measured piles pop out of a dispenser on the side of the truck.
We normally feed mid-December through mid-April, 1st of May, and then we'll stop as long as we've got green up and green grass. We're always challenged. Our number one thing, it just has to rain. Drought is our number one challenge. We have to have rain in order to grow grass, in order to stay in business.
Boone is president of the New Mexico Cattle Growers Association and a fifth-generation rancher. His great-great-grandfather started this spread in 1880. It's a story repeated at many cattle ranches all across the state, places where risks are numerous.
Feed prices, up and down markets, fuel prices, all of our expenses are an issue. Government regulation is getting to be more and more and more all the time.
At the bigger places, a single family cannot do all the work alone. So, at times like roundups, ranchers often depend on neighbors and friends to pitch in.
It's a time-honored tradition in cow country. We do have an outstanding bunch of neighbors around us here that comes and helps us, and then we go help them.
This trail through New Mexico's parched Jornada del Muerto desert is where 4 centuries ago, Oñate brought the first cattle herd here from Mexico. It was a big herd, including 5,000 Corriente cattle, very different from today's popular beef breeds. Here at the New Mexico Farm and Ranch Museum in Las Cruces, among the various popular breeds, you can see the descendants of the early Spanish cattle.
So in this pen, we have several cows. We have a bull. The bull is with them, and then right now we have, I think we're up to 5 babies in this pen.
The Corriente is a tough, hardy breed. They can survive on little water and sparse vegetation. Corriente are also more lean, bringing them some new popularity as a beef source.
Today, the Corriente breed is used mostly for rodeo. They're roping cattle. They're because of the way their horns are.
After the 1860s, New Mexico saw the arrival of the first European beef breeds, Hereford, Angus, and others. Big spreads became more common. Roundups, chuck wagons.
That's where the cowboys ate. That's where they slept, around the chuck wagon at night. The chuck wagon cook cooked all their meals, and that's where they sat around the campfire at night. That was their social life.
Today, ranching traditions are harder to find. Every year, more New Mexico family ranches disappear. As ranch children become adults, they often feel the risks of raising cattle are too great, and they leave.
It just seems like the world has more attractions all the time. Number one, they can make more money doing what we're doing here. It just seems like there's just not a whole lot of attraction to bring them back.
Boone is confident there will always be family ranches, just fewer and farther between. He says those that survive will do so because of who they are and how they handle the many challenges.
We just roll with the punches and keep coming back.
Bob Martin, KRQE News 13.
When we return on Legendary New Mexico, we'll find out how native agriculture has helped shape New Mexico. Plus, we'll take a look at the green chili that put our state on the foodie map.
Long before New Mexico was known for signature crops like green chili, one of the primary foods came on a cob. Corn not only helped Pueblo Indians native to the land sustain their lives, but in some cases it determined where they would live. David Romero has their story.
Blazing sun and fertile soil, two things that New Mexico has always had in abundance. Combining those near a source of water helped Native Americans cultivate one of the most important crops for their survival, corn.
You get your starch, your sugar, and a little bit of nutrients from corn. So as long as you had corn, you could survive.
Finding ways of developing special tools for farming, members of the different pueblos were able to establish unique growing methods where other crops like squash and beans were grown together with corn.
That's why they're called the Three Sisters, is because they do things for each other, they help each other grow, and together they're a balanced meal. Basically, corn, takes nitrogen from the soil. Beans put nitrogen back in the soil. And then corn is seen as the eldest sister just because it's the tallest, and it also acts as a trellis for the beans. And then the squash is seen as the second, the middle sister because it's the protector. So the spiny, the prickly leaves of the squash deter bugs. So that's why it, helps the corn and the beans.
Protecting the crops from the elements and insects weren't the only worries of the tribes, but also finding a constant source of water.
The Pueblos cultivated corn when they built their permanent villages. And we built them along valleys and the foothills of mountains and where there was permanent water sources. So that's basically the only reason that Pueblos were really able to thrive in a permanent setting. Many of the other tribes were nomadic.
With the arrival of the Spanish came new challenges for agriculture, from supplying foods for new settlers on top of maintaining enough food for their own families. But out of hardship came new ways of living and eating.
I really feel like it made sure that we were able to produce, enough food for everybody. But with the introduction of cows and sheep and chickens and fruit trees, some of those orchards that they built, they expanded and they took over some of our native species of chokecherry trees and wild plums and, all that kind of stuff.
As with most things in the Native American culture, their food, its growth, and everything associated with it is sacred. So is keeping the tradition alive.
Agriculture is definitely coming back, and a lot of people in my generation, and younger are learning it again.
David Romero, Legendary New Mexico.
Although New Mexico farmers grow many crops, none enjoy the global recognition like one in particular, the chili pepper. Just how New Mexico's chili became both a cultural icon and a major cash crop for our state is an amazing story. Here to tell it is reporter Bob Martin.
A sound and smell recognized across New Mexico. Whether it's from Hatch, Chimayo, Dixon, Velarde, or other places, we love our chili. However, the story of New Mexico chili might never have been were it not for one man, Fabian Garcia. More than a century ago, when New Mexico was still a territory, Garcia was the first horticulturist at New Mexico State University in Las Cruces.
And he realized that only Hispanics were eating the chili peppers. They were only in backyard gardens. So he was wondering, could I standardize this chili to make it something as an industrial size crop?
This is the chili pepper breeding greenhouse.
Paul Bosland has Fabian Garcia's job today breeding chili at NMSU. He says Chile's journey here began in South America, where human chili cultivation started more than 10,000 years ago.
By the time Columbus arrives in 1492, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mayans have already incorporated chilies into their cuisines, and they have different chilies for different uses, just like we do today.
Use of chili for New Mexico families arrived with Spanish colonists around 1600. For almost 3 centuries, chili use was small scale, until NMSU's Fabian Garcia and his desire to help farmers find a new cash crop. He started with existing varieties and began to hybridize.
And after about 10 years of selecting and choosing ones that would grow well, he picked one out called New Mexico No. 9, and that was the very first New Mexican pod type.
Chili boomed across southern New Mexico, including Hatch. Varieties were perfected to cope with shorter growing seasons up north, higher elevations, and to offer different flavors. NMSU's Roy Nakayama developed a variety called Big Jim, the world's largest chili.
We'll inoculate these.
Today, Boslin works to create even more flavorful, desirable varieties.
No chili variety is good forever. We continue to have disease issues.
NMSU is also home to the Chili Pepper Institute, promoting and distributing New Mexico chili seed around the world. Some of the most popular is ornamental chili.
And we began to name them after the different holidays.
Chili for every season. Bob Martin, KRQE News 13.
Stay right there. When we come back, we're exploring the vines of New Mexico wineries and breweries. And we'll take a closer look at the farm-to-table restaurant revolution. Legendary New Mexico, in partnership with TLC Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling.
Long known as the land of enchantment, connoisseurs of fine wines and malty beer brews are seeking New Mexico as a destination for top products in their fields. David Romero gives us a look at their growing popularity.
The rich soils of New Mexico not only provide for its beautiful landscapes, but some of the most prime grape growing areas in the country. That's put the state right at the top when it comes to making wine.
Chemically, we have a lot of good things that happen. We have a lot of good drainage, and we can work with the soils to basically bring out the best in our grapes.
And that's something that the early Spanish settlers noticed when they arrived here in the 1600s and began planting crops for growing grapes. This makes New Mexico the oldest wine-producing region in the country, nearly 150 years before it even began in California.
You know, when the Spanish first came up, they needed wine. It wasn't something we made because it was something fun to have. We needed wine, because without wine, there are no sacraments. Without sacraments, there's no life.
Through droughts, prohibition, and other hurdles in its history, winemaking saw a resurgence in the 1980s, and the industry has never looked back. With 55 wineries currently in operation in New Mexico, old traditions live on.
We have big wineries, we have small wineries, and it's an adventure to go out and seek these wines and find something different.
From popping a cork to cracking a can, New Mexico's other passion is breweries.
I think what makes New Mexico great at producing beer and cider is our climate, the fact that we have a lot of beer drinkers and wine drinkers, and the weather brings people to town.
According to 2015 stats from the Brewers Association, New Mexico ranks 12th in the nation for small brewers per capita and have nearly 50 small breweries. Not too bad for an industry that's only seen a rebirth within the last 30 years.
It's a challenge, like any business, to get a business going and get people interested and to try something different.
It's awesome just exploring all the different flavors. We have great quality breweries here, a lot of award-winning breweries, and it's just a great time for the craft beer revolution.
From centuries worth of devotion in growing the grapes and fermenting the wine, to brewing grains into a frothy mug of beer, aficionados of both concoctions will enjoy a little bit of New Mexico every time they fill up their glass. David Romero, Legendary New Mexico.
Seeking out the freshest ingredients with maximum flavor and nutrition, that's the driving force of Farm to Table, a movement that's been growing for decades. Although the lifestyle movement known as farm to table is relatively new, our state has been involved in the practice for centuries.
Agriculture is the fourth largest, what we call, economic sector in the state, which means it's very valuable to the state.
Pam Roy, the executive director of Farm to Table, says that within the past 2 decades, New Mexicans have been wanting to keep more of those crops close to home.
Back then there were about 18 farmers markets, and now there's 80 plus farmers markets in New Mexico.
In the late 1960s, Chef Alice Waters of Berkeley, California, began a movement that went against the commercialized big box model of food distribution and opted for a locally sourced, self-sustaining practice.
You're really trying to participate in an ecosphere where you're not having to source out for many of your ingredients.
In New Mexico, there are nearly 25,000 farms, with more than 1,000 of them in Bernalillo County alone.
The farm-to-table movement over the last 10 years has just really been exploding.
Monty Skarsgård started his farming career at Los Poblanos Organics in the North Valley. As the industry grew, he rebranded into his own operation, Skarsgård Farms, which is now situated both in Albuquerque and Los Lunas.
We basically run a 40-acre farm. We run a home delivery business, and I've been doing a lot more season extension to be able to grow year-round.
And just down the road, Peculiar Farms is able to provide beef, dairy, and produce that is, well, peculiar.
And that really came out of a desire for ourselves to be able to have these products, right? Heirloom products, that the flavor was amazing.
So what's the difference between an heirloom product and the conventional big box product that you find in most produce sections? Well, let's compare these two tomatoes.
Most commercial tomatoes are harvested, they call it at first blush. And then commercially, they have ethylene gas chambers that they put food in.
The ethylene gas works as an aging hormone, which induces ripening. But such hormones and preservatives are thought by some to cause various medical problems in humans. The heirloom tomato, on the other hand, is grown with traditional practices. Its right-off-the-vine ripeness packs heavier vitamin content and robust flavor. However, it has a much shorter shelf life.
I honestly feel like our taste buds kind of let us know that the food is healthy.
Chad Brummett, Legendary New Mexico. Just before the break, we met some New Mexico farmers that are part of the growing farm-to-table movement. But why has this lifestyle become so popular? New Mexico's agricultural sector generated nearly $3.4 billion in 2015, and while the majority of those products left the state for resale, thousands of New Mexicans have been swooping up locally grown foods as part of the farm-to-table movement.
The economic opportunities span many things.
So why is the farm-to-table movement growing so popular amongst New Mexicans? Thomas Dolahite, a multi-generational farmer at Peculiar Farms, says that there are numerous benefits to getting fresh beef and produce.
If I can pick it and take it to, let's say, La Montanita Co-op, for instance, or to a local farmer's market, and you have it that same day or the next day, and it's prepared right away, it's not just a taste issue, it's also a health issue.
Studies conducted by the University of California show that vegetables can lose anywhere from 15 to 55% of their vitamin content within 3 days after being harvested. But farm to table isn't just about the health benefits. There's also the flavor.
You taste a tomato that you just picked off of your plant in your backyard, and there's a vitality. There's a different dance it does on your palate.
Carrie Eagle is the executive chef of Farm and Table in Albuquerque, and she knows a thing or two about the vitality of flavor. She was a recent winner on Food Network's Chopped. Chef Carrie has a distinct advantage over many restaurants, working in concert with Soul Harvest Farms, which just so happens to be located on the same property as Farm and Table.
It's given me the ability to work with them on a regular basis and really plan both weekly and kind of quarterly and seasonally.
One of New Mexico's premier organic and local food retailers is La Montanita Co-op, which distributes locally produced food from more than 280 farms and ranches. Those goods are sold in their stores throughout the state and to restaurants such as The Grove, Los Poblanos, the Artichoke Cafe, and the Blue Corn Cafe, just to name a few.
I think it's better food for our children. I think it's so vital and so important, especially in an agricultural community that we as New Mexicans proclaim to be, to really follow through and purchase your food from the local farmer at every opportunity.
Chad Brummett, Legendary New Mexico. Thank you for joining us this evening, and if you're looking for more stories about what makes our state so legendary, head over to legendarynewmexico.com. Have a great evening.